America, my name is Irony Osei-Frimpong, and you are here watching The Black Athenians. This is going to be a fantastic show. This is going to be one of those shows that you're going to want to tweet to your friends and share on Facebook, because I'm going to go through a lot of America. And I actually want to get this done. I want to get this done in 45 minutes so that you can show it in class and then discuss it the next day, because there's going to be a lot, and we're going to learn about freedom, and we're going to learn about rights, and we're going to do it briskly, but I think efficiently. And I want to start you off. The theme of today's show is Martin Luther King's unfinished work. Toward the end of his life, he realized that we won integration, but we can't pay for anything, and that might be a job. And it doesn't matter if you can sit in the front of the bus if you can't afford the ticket, or if you could sit in the cafeteria but you can't afford anything on the menu. And he came to think about economic inclusion as the unfinished work of civil rights. So I'm going to start with two analogies, and then we're going to get into it. First analogy is, imagine that you are shivering outside of a bar. You desperately want to get into the bar. You fight to get into the bar. You want to get into the bar. You get all right. You got everything fitted. You got your edges right and everything. And you get into the bar. You think, I'm into the bar. That's great. Then you find out the bar has a 2-drink minimum. Now you're in the bar and you can't afford to be in that bar. The bouncer's looking at you like, I'm waiting for you to order a drink. You're kind of like walking around hoping nobody notices that you can't afford to be there because it's cold outside. You don't want to go out there, but this place is not for you. It's for people who can pay for 2 drinks, and that's not you. And so there's a little bit of anxiety because the bouncer's looking at you, and you can tell his eyes are on you. Right? So that's one analogy. The second analogy that's very close to the situation of being black in America is, you really want to play in this poker game. You fight to get in on the table. You want them to invite you in, or you just think by right you should be able to sit down and play poker and exercise your rights as an American and gamble. And then you sit down and you play poker, and would you believe the ante is $200 and you have 25? So you're sitting at the table, but you can't afford to be there. I'll say it again. You're sitting at the table, it's your turn to ante up, and you can't afford to play the game. So these are cases where you formally have rights, but you don't have the means to exercise them. So we're going to delve into the question of whether you actually do have rights if you can't exercise them. All right, Matthew, hit the opening.
To the beat, y'all.
Yeah. Sound good to me. Never change the ways for the world or the government. If I was the president, then I would state facts. You leave it up to me, I'll paint the White House black and ain't no future in your front.
To the beat, y'all.
Yeah. Sound good to me. Never change the ways for the world or the government. If I was the president, then I would state facts. You leave it up to me, I'll paint the White House black and ain't no future in your front.
All right, so now we're talking about the Black Athenians. We're going to talk about the unfinished work of King. Now, know that none of this is possible without the work of Broderick Flanagan. Can you throw up a picture of Broderick? Broderick Flanagan is a local artist based in Athens, Georgia, and this is filmed at his studio, Flanagan Studios, at 585 Vine Street. And none of this is possible with him. So if you need a mural in town, if you need your family portrait in town, if you need anything that is art-related, he does lessons that are wonderful, and also corporate retreats, bat mitzvahs, I kind of put them both together, didn't I? Bat mitzvahs and bar mitzvah, quinceañeras, Anything that you could use art lessons for, he does it and does a fantastic job. I'm looking at his art right now in his studio. So that's Broderick Flanagan, based in Athens. So you can do it in your backyard. You could do a mural. Also, he runs Enlightened Media Productions. Now, Enlightened Media Productions is also based in Athens, and it hooks up businesses with black businesses. So, for example, you're working with a business that's been around for 8 generations in Athens, which means it's white, if it has any sort of resources. Because 8 generations ago, we were, terrorized. No, 8 generations ago, we were in chains. I was about to say 8. But we were here. Because as long as it's been in Athens, there have been black people in Athens. So, yeah, if your business is that old, you don't contract with black people. But you should contract with black people. And Broderick will hook your business up with the contractor you need. So if you need your floors done, if you need a roofer, if you need an electrician, if you need, if you're having a wedding and you need a photographer and a hairstylist, you don't need to go to your cousin. Your cousin's doing fine. You need to go and talk to Broderick, and he'll find you a black beautician who will get all of your bridesmaids right for the day. And he'll also work with the business to make sure that everyone is meeting everyone's needs. So that's Broderick Flanagan, and that's who makes all of this possible. Thank you, Broderick. And now, I also have another plug. We're trying to grow black businesses one bit at a time. There's a cat named Mark Brown who emailed me and said he's going to send me a shirt. And would you believe he did? So this is the shirt. A setback is just a setup for a comeback. Marion Barry. Once again, a setback. Oh, he's one of your people. We got a DC native here. Marion Barry. See, let me tell you, I grew up and Marion Barry was just, in my mind, the cat who got caught with cocaine from he was set up. 14 for work. I know. I'll get to that. All right, so I was, as a young man growing up in California, my understanding of Marion Barry was that he got caught sniffing cocaine off of a prostitute's belly, and then was talking about he was framed. And of course, at the time, I had a hard time believing that. Would you believe 30 years later, I think he was framed. I think he was a target, because you want to know what else Marion Barry was doing? Employing black people in Washington, D.C. When Marion Barry started in D.C., I think they had 3% of the contract. When he got out, they had 47% of the contract. That was a man who was doing work for the black community.
His entire life. Even when he got out of jail, he got reelected. Then he was on city council.
Yes.
Who was his campaign manager?
Yeah. Marion Barry. So, if you could get caught smoking cocaine from the stripper's belly and then get reelected.
Just to be clear.
Yes?
That is not what they believe they caught him. They caught him smoking crack with a stripper.
Okay, he was smoking crack with a stripper. There's a difference because, this was in the 80s, and that's what the FBI gave us. So Marion Barry put black people to work. And also, I saw a picture. I think I might have saw a picture with him and possibly King. I saw a picture with him and someone else in Morehouse. I think Marion Barry is an OG. So we might have to do a show on Marion Barry another time. If this was the black DC people, I would have already done a show on Marion Barry. But I think he was a target. And so I appreciate Mark Brown sending me this shirt. A setback is just a setup for a comeback. Marion Barry with Colin Kaepernick on the flag.
And that was actually part of his slogan for his reelection.
All right. And you know what? He got reelected. You're darn right, Marion Barry. Rest in peace. And so if you want to talk to Mark Brown about getting yourself a shirt, it's mark.brown@national.ps.com. Once again, it's mark.brown@national.ps.com. Thank you, Mark Brown. there might be a Marion Barry show into our future because that is the quality of governance we need and the quality of advocacy we need. And I suspect he was always an OG. I suspect Marion Barry was always in the struggle when he wasn't on that crack. So, I got people in the audience saying it was one time. Yeah. So first of all, we're gonna get this. We're gonna walk you through the unfinished business. I don't think I've said anything that can't be that's PG-13 and lower. So still show this in your classrooms because we're going to do a lot of work here. Show this in your Bible studies. Show this in your book club because it's possible that not everyone read the book. And email this out to your friends because we're going to do a lot of work here. So the unfinished business of king. We're going to start with making a distinction between morality and rights, because with King, you kind of got them all. He was part of the civil rights movement, but he was also a very moral young man. He was a young man. I'm 40 and he was 39 when he died, so he was always a moral young man. So we get confused about what morality and rights are. So I'm going to give you just like a 2-minute distinction between morality on one hand and rights on the other. Now, morality, you don't need the world to play along, right? There's this great, it's all in your mind and how you can control your will and what you do. The world can be against you. There's this great Monty Python sketch where they're all singing and then it cuts to a guy in a jail and his hands are cuffed singing along this happy song, clapping while his hands are cuffed. So like he is still free in his mind. The world is not playing along, he's in jail. But in his mind, he's still like a free person, right? So for morality, it's about your relationship to yourself and your soul. Forget the world. You know, they can crucify you, whatever, it doesn't matter. Now for rights, they need to be recognized by other people. I need the world to play along. Excuse me. Rights need to be secured and they need to be recognized, and we're going to talk about that from the founding on. So insofar as we have rights, we can't just talk about like, well, I feel free. No, I feel like I could fly. But the world's not playing along, so I really can't fly. Insofar as rights, we're talking about rights, the world has to play along. If you feel like that car is yours, but you don't have paperwork that other people recognize, that means that car is not yours. The world has not played along. You will be thrown in jail for stealing that car if you act like it was yours. So rights have to be recognized and secured. Morality, not so much. So let's make a distinction between rights and privileges. All right? So rights can be exercised by everybody. Rights can be exercised by everybody. Privileges are for members. Members of a race, members of a class, members of a club, members of a clique. I can do this, you can't. Unfortunate for you, not so much for me because I have privileges. So rights can be exercised by everyone equally. Privileges can't. All right? And there's a distinction. It's very important to understand. So if anyone's talking about rights that can't be exercised equally by everyone, they're actually talking about privileges. And so we want to make sure that all of our rights are actually exercised as rights so we don't abuse the term. So rights are just freedom externalized in the world so that everyone actually pays attention and respects them. And they're secured by government or other people's recognition. So rights are just what freedom looks like externalized. Privileges are an externalization of a special privilege. It's not universal, so they're not rights. It's not a matter of freedom. Freedom is something that everyone can do with everyone else. Privileges, something special people can do. So now we're going to talk about the founders. Can you give me why did I go through all this? We're going to talk about the founders. All right, so right here, you have a picture of the founding fathers. And they were very good. They all studied their Locke. They studied their Hobbes. They're very good at securing property rights in the Constitution. Like, property rights we think of as the only rights that matter, mostly because they were the only rights that were secured in the Constitution, secured and enabled. And we're going to talk about how they were enabled. So property rights were secured in the Constitution. They were enabled insofar as all of the people who could adjudicate the property rights had to themselves have property. Right? So what does that mean? The founders restricted suffrage to white men. That's not in the Constitution. They let the states do that with the understanding that the states would do that. And you know what the states did? That. So the suffrage and real political power was restricted to white men who could actually exercise these rights. And that's important. And they could exercise these rights because in order to exercise these rights, they needed a stable source they needed some sort of economic security. And you know what property was back then? And probably still is now. Let's be honest, it's still now. Economic security. All right? So in order to exercise those rights, one of the enabling conditions was property, both formally in the Constitution and informally, insofar as in order to do things, you need a space to do it. And you need equipment. You talk about a lot of these black businesses, like black hustlers and all that stuff. They think, well, and a lot of the people who sell entrepreneurship, they don't take the necessity of capital seriously. You need money in order to be in the game. You need money in order to exercise any rights. You try to have a press without money. Try to keep your lights on without money. You try to exercise any of your rights without money. Free speech, good. When someone contests your speech, try to find a lawyer who's going to do it for free. You don't have rights. Then you're working at the lawyer's discretion. So all of these rights, the founders quasi-knew required property or economic stability and security in order to be exercised. They knew that. And it's even in who could vote. White men with property in order to exercise these rights. Now it gets tricky. This is where it gets real tricky. What happens when we universalize these rights? And we decide that, look, you know what? It's unfortunate that just white men with property can vote. We should, and actually seriously lay claim to rights, we should universalize these rights. We should give it to, slaves and people without property and women. The problem is going to be twofold. In the literature, they had a problem. One, they didn't want people without property rewriting the Constitution, using their power to rewrite the Constitution and to negate their property rights. And then two, they didn't want people to be tools of their employer with the idea that if you don't have property, you actually are so insecure that you're going to be the tool of your employer. You don't have independent economic security. You're going to be dependent on some employer, or dependent on your master, or dependent on your husband, which makes you a tool of them. So we didn't want that screwing up political power. So those were the arguments at the beginning for why suffrage needed to be restricted to white property-owning men. Now let's say we universalize suffrage. We universalize suffrage, but we don't universalize the enabling conditions for its exercise. I'll say that again. We've universalized suffrage. That means everyone can vote, and everyone's supposed to have rights. Two actually different things. But we haven't universalized the enabling conditions for their exercise. You can't exercise your rights because now you're dependent on a boss who's going to look very carefully at your vote. So now we need like a secret ballot. And now, do you really have free speech? Do you really have free speech if you're not economically dependent? If your boss doesn't like what you say, do you really have free speech? No. You're that cat in the bar who now gets in but isn't really allowed to be comfortable and enjoy the bar because all of your movements within the bar are determined by the bouncer's eyes looking at you. You are not independent. You're not. Am I okay on the You're not. Is the show okay? Good. All right.
It's just the echo still there a little bit, so it's not a big deal.
Yeah. So you're not okay in the bar. You're in a position where you live and die by or your rights are secured by the bouncer and the bouncer's discretion. And that's not freedom. You're anxious because you don't have the money to be there. Now, let's say we're going to start with gender and then move to race. Now, let's say that you're an attractive woman in the bar and you're in the same spot. What are you going to do? You need to somehow get 2 drinks to get the bouncer's eyes off of you. One thing you could do is find a guy with property and attach yourself to him. You know, you could bat your eyes in a certain way and kind of do things that some people know how to do. And hopefully he'll be like a nice guy and like you like guys, or a nice partner. And this person has the security, the economic security, to buy you 2 drinks. So you fulfill the 2-drink minimum by attaching yourself to a property owner. Marcus? No? All right, so by attaching yourself to someone who's economically secure. However, you yourself are still not secure because you go and you start flirting with this guy, but he hasn't bought you the 2 drinks yet. Like, he buys 1 drink and talks about buying another drink, but you're looking at the bouncer over your shoulder. You're still dependent on this cat's discretion. And so he could use that and weaponize that to make sure that you do whatever he wants you to do so that you don't get kicked out into the curb. So you've universalized the rights to be in that bar, but since you haven't universalized the conditions to exercise freedom within the bar, you're still dependent. You're still not only not free, you're still very anxious. All right? So you're not free, you don't have rights. It's still the privileges of the men in the bar who are economically secure. You yourself are not economically secure. You're dependent on them, and you hope that they won't use their privilege to kick you out. Now, this is the origin of family law. The history of family law since the recognition of women till now is how do we mitigate this dependence of spouses, especially female spouses, on the economically secure male, right? How do we make it the case that within this marriage, within this arrangement, that both people are free and one person is not a tool of the other? Because if one person doesn't have independent economic security, then they're a tool. They're completely dependent on if the female in the relationship, and I'm norming this heteronormative in a way that's going to make some people very uncomfortable, but I'll just say it right now because we're talking about the history of conceptions of rights. So if the female in the relationship does not have an independent claim that's backed for the government, then she is dependent on a guy who can use his kind of monopoly on economic security in the relationship to punish the female in the relationship. So the history of family law is how do we balance the power in that relationship so that one person doesn't have all of the economic security and the other person isn't completely dependent. So that's why we have community property and not dependent anymore, joint accounts. And we have alimony if you get divorced. And the history of family law emerges from this problem. So now that we've secured that, in the history of family law emerges from this problem. So now that it's actually a fascinating problem, I might do an entire different show on it because we still want, at this time, we still would really like. There's a lot of work to be done to raise a family, and not all of it's remunerative or wins economic security. So we still want the woman at home. In this story, we still want the woman at home taking care of the kids and keeping the family and all that. So she is never going to have an independent means of economic security. However, she needs to at least have a claim on his. And these are all white people. Black people, this doesn't work. We don't like in this story, in this genealogy of rights, we're still picking stuff for free. Make no mistake. So the origin of family rights comes through that, trying to get women the means to exercise their rights, not as tools of their husband. Right? So you need economic security. In order to do that, you need some sort of claim that's backed by the government on your husband's earnings. And because understand that your husband only has rights because his property rights are backed by the U.S. Constitution. So if they had actually written the Constitution with everyone in mind, these family rights would be embedded in the Constitution. They would have had to be, insofar as they're necessary for people to exercise rights, for everyone to exercise rights, and not just white men. So we've dealt with women. Now, I think the poker analogy is a better analogy for black people because no one's buying us drinks. So you fought to get at this table. You're at the table now. You feel like I've arrived. I've always wanted to gamble too. I want to exercise my right to gamble. And you're like, I got my $25. I'm going to gamble. I'm going to be great. And then the dealer says, the ante's $200. In which case, you look around and are like, can I borrow some money? So, the white people who've already been at that table said, all right, I'll give you some money. And that's pretty much sharecropping. So that's sharecropping. I'll borrow you some. I'll let you borrow some money if you pay a reasonable. Some people say like, no, we need to give him $400 and a mule. The other people are like, nah, we'll just let him borrow money at some interest, and he'll just pay us back with his winnings from gambling. While the people around you gamble with the money like that they have, because they own the property. So that's the history of Athens and pretty much Black America. And when you owe somebody money, if they want you to get coffee for them, you every now and then sit out a hand and go make some coffee for them because you owe them money at their largesse and maybe you haven't paid it back. So there's a dependence relationship with them. That also is the relationship between any employee in an at-will firm. Your economic security depends on your boss. And in an at-will firm, that means they can fire you at will. They can fire you for what you put on social media. They can fire you for what you tweet about. They can fire you for what someone said you heard. They heard you say. They can fire you because they want your wife. And if they fire you, they can just take it. So, when you're completely economically dependent, and this is what the founders were actually worried about. If we universalize suffrage, then all of these workers will be completely dependent upon and tools of politically their employer. So in order to have economic security and still be an employee, you need some sort of worker empowerment that's independent of your employer or that will hold the employer to certain working conditions. You need to pretty much not be a slave. So in order for you to have rights, you need empowerment in your workplace, or you're just a tool of your employer. If your economic security is based on your employer, then you need, it's not secure, it's at their discretion. The rights are still their privileges, they're not your rights. They only become your rights when you have say in your working conditions. Once again, that's backed by the same thing that backs their property rights, the government. Right? So you need a contract for your labor. And if you want to actually negotiate that contract, you want to negotiate from a place of strength, or at least equal strength, not one employer, not a one employee versus the employer. You want a balance of power, so you form a union. You negotiate that contract. And through unions, you get the economic security to actually be free and enjoy all of the other rights. So you don't have to, you can write a letter to the editor and have it in the press without worrying about the getting fired from your job. You can organize politically without worrying about your employer finding out that you support one candidate while she supports another. With economic security, you have rights. Without economic security and the means to actually exercise them, that means you need, a typewriter, a computer, and a press, and all that stuff. Without this economic security, without these means to exercise rights, you don't have rights. And this is what King was figuring out as he was winning all of these formal rights. He is understanding that these formal rights were not substantive because we didn't have the economic security to actually exercise them or contest them. But make no mistake, this isn't just about economics, right? So now you're at the table, black people. Now let's say you come in with enough money. You come in with $250. Somehow, before you got into the game, all your people, they passed around the hat at church. Your grandma reached in and opened up the King James Bible and pulled out her 20s. And you came up with $250 to actually play in this poker game. So the dealer says, ante up. You ante in your $200. You feel good about yourself. And then you realize everyone at the table is in cahoots. They're in cahoots because it's not just about economic security. Remember, it was white male privilege. Now we have to talk about the other side. The fraternity of white men actually is a condition of exercising those rights as rights and not being a tool. Because if you sit down and you think you're an individual and they think they're a group, you're food. So you're playing, they're telling each other what they're holding, and you're like, but it's the only game in town. So you can win if you're very good. You can win if you're very good, or if they decide they want to put you in their white male club. But you have to not discount the fraternity of white men around you, and you're still an outsider. And that matters because they go home after the game to their community, and they're all intermarried. And you go home to your community, and they don't want their money sneaking into your community, and they would very much like your money sneaking into theirs. So how do we mitigate the fraternal aspect? All right? That once again turns these rights into not individual privileges. Now we're talking about group privileges because they're in cahoots. They've clicked up. And that clique is organized to feed you. And you can't defend yourself. You only have $50 left. You're gonna find a lawyer with that? So they're a clique. And you thought you're in the game just because you're at the table. And you thought you're in the game because you're economically secure because you can pay the ante. But you're still not in the game because you don't have rights because they're not equally exercised. They use their group power over your individual power. And I don't have the picture up here. I didn't actually put this together until I read Harold Cruz's Crisis of the Negro Intellectual. Once again, it's called Crisis of the Negro Intellectual by Harold Cruz. It's a lot of book. It's good all the way through. I learned a lot about Raisin in the Sun, and he had some really nice stuff about James Baldwin and Paul Robeson. I learned a lot, but it's a lot of book. You just need to read the intro. It's like the first 11 pages. You read the first 11 pages, and he broke it down in a way that I didn't actually take seriously until I read it. 10, 15 years ago. And he said, look, all of the things we take to be rights are really privileges that are backed by the power of your social group. And black people, your social group doesn't have any power, so that means you don't have any rights. And he was like, look, the people in America have rights are WASPs, white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, Catholics, and Jews. They have both the economic security and the social power to actually demand rights. Everybody else, like, you don't have rights. You're here at their discretion. Your group can't fight with their group. So, I mean, to this day, how many black people do you know who actually are honest in demanding things to white people of white people? I know like 6. And I know a lot of Negroes. So, I was about to say, 6 might be high. I don't want to have to name them because I might not know 6. Who are actually comfortable demanding rights as a matter of right from white people because the way the economy is set up, and give me the wolf, the way the economy is set up, capital in America, in order for us to do anything, even at their privilege, is white, right? So capital in America is white. We're about to throw up a graphic that shows that. And so you can't really contest things while you want their capital. And in order for all this scheme to work under the kind of veneer of universalism, you need a handful of black people to say the right things. Like, this isn't the case. That, like, everything I'm talking about is a joke. So that's where you get, Right. And I've said this before, and I'll say it again. The punishment for being black as an individual isn't that bad. The punishment for standing for black people, even if they're in your family and in your community, is crushing, right? So if you're willing to stand for black people, especially black men, but if you're willing to stand for black people and black communities, you are a target. And the best way, if you're black, to make money in these United States is make it known to the people you're playing poker with, no, I'm part of the clique because I too will help you take money from the black community and into the white community. You just have to, let me have my cut. Right? So that was the Obama deal. And I think he got his cut. And that's a deal of a lot of people of my class. Look, I could have done a lot of things. I went to a fancy school. I could have done a lot of things in my life. But I wanted to figure this out. And every other thing that wasn't, I couldn't find any way to make money that wasn't grimy. So maybe there's a way to make money and be black that's not grimy. I don't know. I'm a smart guy. I never found it. Because all the my graduating class who are rich, who are black, not rich because they're still black, who have any money, any kind of security, they ended up doing some grimy stuff that wasn't good for black communities and making excuses about why it's black people's fault. So I stay by the notion that being black, there's a way to get around it. Standing up for black communities, seriously standing up for black communities and not just doing it in the way that white liberals want you to, that is a punishing affair. And depending on who you talk to, it's a great way to catch a bullet. And by the way, if you like anything I'm doing right now, let me make sure I have enough time to wrap this up. Good. If you like anything I'm doing right now, you need to go over to thefunkyacademic.com and kick in for a monthly. $5, $15, $50 a month, that would be great. It's not going to change my message, but it will keep the lights on. It'll pay Matthew, the intern. If you didn't see his show last week about what happened to all the racists, it's wonderful. It'll pay to keep me in the studio. So go over, if you like anything I'm doing, go to thefunkyacademic.com or just funkyacademic.com. And on the right panel, you can pay through PayPal. You can pay through a credit card. Just sign up for a monthly or give a one-time donation. Yes. Xavier Horton. Thank you. Xavier Horton. Horton, right? Horton. Xavier.
Xavier.
Or Javier.
Xavier. Fine university named Xavier, right? Louisiana? New Orleans, possibly? Thank you. We need more of that because I want to keep doing it and I want other people and I want to maybe bring on some more interns and I want to pay Matthew more and maybe Broderick more. I want actually like grow capacity. And that'll happen if you tweet this out, if you share this, if you tell all of your friends what I'm doing here. And all of these people, after the Alabama election where black people saved the U.S., the entire U.S., because he was a U.S. senator, saved the entire United States from Roy Moore as a senator. Everyone was saying, thank you, black people, for voting for Roy Moore. I don't know if you can find a demographic for that. But I heard a lot of thank you, black people. You know, thank you doesn't build coalitions. Thank you does not keep the lights on. Money does. So if you want to thank us, Democrats, for saving you, kick down to not just me, although you can start here, but you don't have to start here. Kick down to your local NAACP. Kick down to anyone who's doing independent black media because it starts with the media and will kind of proliferate from there. But it's got to be independent media. Don't kick down to Steve Harvey. He's got his own issues. Yeah, Oprah is fine without us. No, you need to find independent Negroes who will actually tell you, yeah, this is the...
Oprah's giving out $50,000 gift bags at her birthday party.
Yeah, she don't need us. No, and she's also not talking like this. So, when I say that this is the way you thank us for this, right here, is by writing a check. And like, don't tell me what to do with it. No strings. Just make it out to cash. Or just go over to thefunkyacademic.com, sign up on the panel, just put your credit card in, sign up for a monthly, and I'll just keep giving you great news about how we get rights from here. So they universalized rights, but they didn't universalize the conditions to exercise those rights. And we've been struggling with that ever since. Depending on who you talk to, that's a struggle of the feminist movement. Depending on who you talk to, that's a struggle of the civil rights movement for black people and Latinos and now people of color and now white women have gotten on. Like, that's how do you universalize these rights and universalize the conditions? That means universalizing economic security in the form of economic independence, so you're not a tool of the people. So now that you don't need property to be economically dependent, let's say you rent a condo in New York. How do you not become a tool of the person you're renting from? You join a co-op board, right? So you're no longer a tool. You are a participant in the decision-making power. You have say in your status as a member of the co-op, right? How do you become a tool? How do you not become a tool when you're an employee? You join a union. So now you have, once again, these are all things backed by the government. Because their property is backed by the government, your economic security needs to be backed by the government. You join a union. Because now you have say in your working conditions, so you're not merely a tool of your boss. Right? So until black people in these United States are given economic security from the property and the power of the property of white America, and economic security from the cliquishness of white America, we will never be free. Because the only way you can be free in that game is everyone is playing the game as an individual, or these powers have been mediated somehow. And they're supposed to be mediated through the market. And that's what, in a well-ordered market, it could be mediated through the market. But a labor market, all the studies will say, if you have a resume named Duquan versus a resume named Chad, Chad's going to get the interview, right? Duquan, apostrophe and all, is going to be hustling because he's not free. We're still at the hiring manager's discretion. And our rights are not secured because they're not rights. They're still privileges of somebody else. So insofar as you talk about rights, you have to talk about the means of their exercise because that's the struggle of today. That's the unfinished work. If you like anything I've said today, about 60% of what I'm saying can be found, 60% because I had to embellish and kind of figure this a lot out, can be found in Richard Dean Winfield's book, Law and Civil Society. That's Richard Dean Winfield's book, Law and Civil Society. It's an academic book. I'm not going to tell you it's an easy read. It's an academic book. It's not particularly long, but Winfield's a smart guy. So but it is. Am I wrong? Okay, so someone in the audience is using that for a dissertation. So it's a lot of book and a little book. But I worked through it a few years ago, and it actually formulated this. And it's also the motivation for Richard Dean Winfield's platform. This guy, the guy who wrote this book, is running for Congress in District 10. That's the Athens district in the U.S. Congress, and we should support him. Because if you want more people talking like I'm talking, he's the guy who can do it. He's the guy who won't just do it on his YouTube station. He'll do it from the floor of Congress, talking about how you don't have rights if you don't have means for their exercise. All the healthcare rights, the Obamacare, whatever, it doesn't matter if you can't pay them premiums, if you can't pay those co-pays. All your right to legal counsel, it doesn't matter if you don't have access to a lawyer as a matter of right that's backed, and that access be backed by the government. Because it started with the property rights of white men being backed by the government. The rights of their whiteness was just backed by biology. But the rights of the exercise of their property is backed by the government. So all of these things I'm talking about that secure non-independently wealthy people in order to exercise their right to oppress, or right to speech, their right to whatever, need to be backed by government so that we can participate in the market. Because remember, this is all about how to play a game without being predated upon. Right? I just want to play poker without being predated upon. A predator. I don't want a predator relationship. I don't want to be the prey for someone else's predator. So I hope this is educational. I want you to talk about this with your friends, not just about the formal rights that we extend, but the conditions of their exercise. And I know people are going to say, like, well, look, immigrants do it all the time. They come over here, it's fine. But you know what? Remember what I said about individual blacks. They can do it as long as they don't stand up for other black people. They don't come over here standing up for like justice for wherever they're from. No, that's part of the gig. You leave them back there and, and you say like, I too am good with treating black people in the United States like garbage. That's part of the gig. That's part of you.
What was the term Matthew coined last week?
What was it? The Obama route. That is the Obama route. That is the Obama route. People talk to, yeah, like, you let me, and it's funny because if you, there was an interview about Obama. This is a good story. There was an interview about Obama where they talked to one of his ex-girlfriends before he met Michelle, before he realized that he needed a black wife to be president. There was an interview with one of his white ex-girlfriend's parents. They're like, yeah, we loved Barry. He was fine. He'd come over here. He wasn't talking to his black friend. He was just like a regular white guy. And like that was literally their quote. No, he was just a regular white guy. In other words, he wasn't going over there standing up for black people. That is part of the Obama route. You don't go to this poker game standing up for black people. They'll let you play, and they might not be in cahoots against you if you don't talk about bringing your friends to this game. Yeah. And that goes for like all the people who want to go to Obama route. A lot of people get their feelings hurt about this. Like I know some real estate agents like who think that like, look, I got a white friend, black real estate agent. Like, I got a white friend and they're a real estate agent. I'm just as good as them. So like they're doing fine, I'll do fine. And so the black real estate agent goes and like hustles for listings and like goes to all their white friends because white people are the people who own property. And so like they're like, well, okay, you're selling your house. Let me sell your house for you. And the white people are like, yeah. I'll let you sell my house. And then like right before it all goes down, it turns out that the white people who own the house have a nephew who's also a real estate agent. And it turns out that they're going to let the nephew sell the house. And at the end of the day, you're not in that game. Like, you're not part of that fraternity. So even if you have the security, even if you have the license, you're not part of that fraternity. So you need a government redress that will secure you being able to sell things. That means like anytime a post office needs to be sold, it needs to be sold by a black real estate agent. Like anytime like you need some sort of government security that you too will be able to participate without the benefits of that clique relationship. So thank you for taking the time. I'm going to need you to send this out to everybody. We're trying to raise the quality of discourse in the nation, not just about rights, but about the conditions for their exercise. And I will see you next week. Peace.